Hello everybody, it's Jill Wigmore-Welsh here from Reading in Berkshire, about 40 miles outside London. I'm actually in Reading today. Sometimes I spend time in London, and central London, Greater London as we call it, and sometimes I'm out in West Berkshire, about 40 miles out, and that's literally Greater Reading, I think some people call it, but I know there's lots of Readings all over the world. So this is following on from a talk that I did yesterday. It was more of not just a lecture, it was a movement-informed talk where we were exploring our inner territory. So it was called Meet the Skeleton Family, Discover Your Inner World Territory. And in the talk, I was covering the different skeletal systems that we have. So we have the axial skeleton that starts at the top of your skull and travels all the way down to the bottom of your coccyx, and then includes your thoracic cage. And then you have your appendicular skeletons, which are your limbs, so your upper limb and your lower limb. And the upper limb also includes two bones, your clavicle and your scapula, which are close into the body. So most people know that their clavicle is their collarbone, and the scapula is the bone on your back, a bit like a shield. And in the lower limb, the skeletal system includes part of your pelvis. So let's talk numbers, because this is always an interesting topic. So approximately 80 bones in your axial skeleton, approximately 30 bones in each of your limbs. So if you do a quick add up, that's approximately 200. There are other little bits and pieces here and there, and some people have more and some people have less, but that's a good starting point. And when we talk about the number of joints in the human body, because this is important too, if we include both synovial joints and non-synovial joints, so the synovial joints and non-synovial joints are slightly different, we come up to somewhere in the region of about 360, which is huge numbers of joints. And again, this is extremely important for those people who may have joint problems, and also those who are very interested in discovering how they can align themselves. In other words, how they can keep themselves in balance. So this is what we were talking about yesterday. It was quite a complex talk. There was quite a lot of deep information, and I promised. Have to excuse me. My coffee's in the other room. I promised that I'd send two or three short recordings out. So we did some surface anatomy, and that surface anatomy is a PDF that I've sent out that people can have. And if people listening to this from wherever they are in the world want access to that talk, at a later point I'll be putting it out. But the PDF has gone out onto the platform Restless, where I did the talk. And these three short lessons that I'm recording today are going to form part of the materials that I'm, if you like, providing to extra value. So coming back to this first short lesson, exploration. Let's call it an exploration. And I was reading today about one of the leaders in longevity, and he's a gentleman called Sir Muir. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's actually was a Knight of the Realm, and he is someone who's based at Oxford University. And I can, again, provide links if you're interested in this. And he attributes, one of the major factors he attributes to a long life is curiosity, learning, discovering, finding out new things, novelty, etc. So even if you take away one little bit from the information that I'm providing today, that's also helping you and your longevity. So that's about your health through your life. So the first lesson we touched on, you can do in sitting. In fact, you can do it wherever you are. So if you come to sitting right now, you can always remember you stop the recording if you want to at any time. And also remember that this is not meant to be a medical treatment. So while I'm a healthcare professional, I'm not your healthcare professional. So if you're not sure if you should be doing this kind of work, just do it in your imagination. We know that you can fire your brain off just by doing things in your imagination. So in sitting, I'd like you first of all just to review how you've chosen to sit. Review how much of your body is supported wherever you're sitting. I spend a lot of time going around co-working spaces and observing people sitting in chairs, and often they sit a little bit like a prawn, very curled up, leaning forward. They may be resting on the back of the chair, but many people are not balancing themselves. They're not actually using their bones very much. They're putting a lot of strain on the junctions, the joints, the areas between the bones. So just think about how you're sitting. You may be sitting in an armchair, and in which case you might have most of your body supported by the chair. So your weight may be resting, or you may be sitting on a stool. Your feet might be off the floor. But just draw to your attention, first of all, how you are sitting, how you've chosen to sit. And I want you to start to glance, to look at something in the room. So just look perhaps towards a picture on the wall, or maybe look out of the window. And then stop doing that and just come back to doing what you were doing. And as you repeat that action a few times, notice what is the first thing that moves. So our muscles are responsible for all of our movement. We have different kinds of muscle in the body, but we're talking here about the muscles that make movement happen. So our muscles are responsible for the movement. And as you start to look, I want you to notice whether you turn your eyes and your head towards the same direction. If you're sitting at a table right now, you could have, let's say, you might have your food in front of you. As you're sitting, just reach out, perhaps for a cup, perhaps for cutlery, and notice where the movement starts. Again, does it start with your eyes? Does the movement start with a glance to see where things are? And then as you start to look, do you find your head turns? And then do you find that your arm begins to move, or what is the pattern? Do you always reach out with that same hand? Many people who drink out of a cup or use a knife or fork habitually use the same hand for that action. So remember that the first place is to begin to start with curiosity. If you're sitting, maybe you're quite immobilized, and you're resting against the back of the chair, and maybe you have your meal on a tray in front of you or something similar. Again, notice if there's much movement taking place in your body when you go to perform the actions. And where do you move? So I'm going to make a few suggestions now. Remember, if you've got all of these 360 potential areas that you could move, and you have this set of anything up into 360 joints, about 200 and, I think it's something like 230 of them. 230 of them are synovial. There's lots and lots of places that could move. And it might be that maybe you're not moving the shoulder blade very much. Maybe you're not moving your clavicle. So if you think of a lovely integrated system like a slinky, the slinkies that you can set down the stairs, if you're actually not moving part of that skeleton, then it means that strain and stress is going on other parts. So if your clavicle and your scapula are not moving when you come to move your arm forward or take your arm out to the side, then you might find that the what we call glenohumeral joint, which is the joint that is just to the right hand side of your bra strap, if you like, if you're a woman. If you're not a woman, it's the bump that sits out on the front of your shoulder. You can feel that bony bump, and that's your the top of your humerus. If you go to move the arm and what you find is most of the movement is taking place there, then the important thing to remember is there is only a certain amount of movement that joint is designed to do. So most joints are fantastic when they're working in partnership, in harmony, in families with the ones that are either side, their brothers and sisters and cousins, etc. But when they're working just on their own, what can happen is they can start to become worn. You can start to get some pain. And certainly there are lots of conditions where if somebody does the wrong kinds of movement, you can end up with, you may have heard of words like impingement syndrome, etc. And what are the time where you might be having problems with a joint, but you want to be able to do things and bypass using that joint as much? If you begin to start to think of, for example, as you're doing this little reaching forward movement, if you're just reaching for this cup or knife or whatever, what would it be like just to lean forward and lean back in your body so that you're just rocking forwards and backwards a little on your pelvis? And again, remember, this is your choice. It's not about this is the right way to do it. It's just about thinking, well, what do I do? And how could I move that hand through space? If I leaned forward, my hand would move through space, but it wouldn't be with my arm moving. So play. You can just put your hand on the table if you want to and just play with different ways that you could slide the arm forwards and back, thinking of your elbow. Could slide your arm forwards and back, keeping the elbow relatively still and straight. You could slide the arm forwards and backwards using your clavicle and your shoulder blade. And all of these are using different groups of muscles. This is a really simple movement to do, a really simple activity. Many people get upper limb problems. They get problems with their shoulder, problems with their neck. And the next two short lessons are going to be introducing ways that you can actually take this idea of moving in a slightly different way. You can take this idea of moving in a slightly different way, a slightly different path of movement, slightly different starting point, etc. Some sort of novelty, because novelty is new and interesting, and novelty tells the brain, pay attention, this matters, it's new, it's different. So we call that neuroplasticity, because neuroplasticity helps us when we have new experiences. They help our brain grow and get smarter no matter what age. So you can help yourself to have a bit of a brain shift by beginning to start to introduce a little bit of curiosity into your actions. And this doesn't need to be hard work, just a little tiny bit, a little bit of curiosity. How do I move? How do I move my arm? What happens? What's the first thing when I go to move my arm? Do I look with my eyes, and do my eyes always follow? Well, can I actually keep my head still and just move my eyes? Or have I lost the ability to be able to do that? Do I only move head and eyes together? As I said, we develop habits, and those habits are not irreversible. So this is the first lesson, just beginning to start to be interested and curious about what it is that you are doing. So the second lesson is really to be thinking about the activities that you do when you come up into standing. So if you're able to stand, I want you to think about just transferring your weight from one foot to the other. And again, if you think of all of these bones, the huge number of bones there are through the lower limb, all 30 of them, and all of the different joints, all having to work together. The way that you take your weight through your ankle, for example, through all of the small bones in your foot, can make a difference to the way you take your weight through your knee and your hip. The way that you take your weight through your vertebral column can have an effect. How you balance with your arms. This can all have an impact. And if you have joint pain or discomfort, then sometimes rather than trying to avoid the joint pain, I've led workshops where we have worked on what the pattern is that is triggering the person's pain. And this can be very effective because as soon as the person knows what it is that they do, and I don't mean, well, I get pain when I sit. It's like, well, sitting how? What is it that you do? And helping that person to have some new ways to sit or new ways to stand, new ways to move. I've been doing this work now for the last nearly 50 years. It's a long time. And the last, pretty much exclusively, the last 40 years, I've been specialising in this kind of micro movement work. So this is something that I do know about. It's something that I have worked with tens of thousands of people with over the years of my practice. So if you're up and standing and you're thinking again about coming over onto one leg, just again, explore how many different ways you could do that. Could you just move your bottom slightly over and feel the weight shift? Could you lean with your shoulders and feel your weight shift? Could you just bring your attention to putting the weight onto the outside of your foot and feel your weight shifting as you think of that area? So draw your attention to different places in your limb. So your lower limb, I want you to think of your foot, allowing the weight, introduce the weight to going onto the outer border of your foot, and then feel as you take the weight over onto the other leg and you put the weight onto the outer border of that foot, how the outer border of the first foot doesn't have as much weight on it. So thinking of the foot, feeling that pressure through the ball of the foot. We did some surface anatomy and where the ball of the foot is and the ankle joint, where the ankle joint is. So as you're leaning over to the side, think of the area of the ankle joint where you have that bone that sticks out on the outside of the foot. And think about moving that. So you're consciously moving that out to the side, feeling how that shifts the weight. And then draw attention to the knee and see how you could think about moving that knee in and out. But remember, you're not going to be doing this if you have joint problems that might be causing you pain. And if you do choose to do it, then that is your choice. This is not a medical treatment. I always say, I'm not your healthcare professional. I am a healthcare practitioner, a very highly experienced healthcare professional, advanced practice physiotherapist in neurological and orthopedic rehabilitation, as well as a psychologist. But I'm not your healthcare professional. Anything that I do where I'm working specifically with health, I have to do a full assessment. So if you're choosing to do the lesson, make sure you do it in your imagination first. Just do it very slowly, very gently, and don't overdo it. If you want to just think through the lesson, that's great. So shifting the weight across and then putting your hands, if you can, on your rib cage, just the lower part of your rib cage, and just inviting that rib cage to move over to the side. So if you're moving your weight over onto your left leg, you're moving your rib cage over towards the left side. If you're doing it onto the right side, you're moving the rib cage over to the right side and feel what that does to make a change. Now, many people have a very large restriction in their ability to be able to remember how to move their rib cage. Also, it's an area where when people have osteoporosis, they can have a fracture, which can be painful. You can also get those in the low part of your back when you develop osteoporosis. So go very, 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 very slowly and gently. And remember, a tiny amount of movement can make an enormous difference. So you're not wanting to suddenly do something. You're not pushing yourself. And as I say, this is all your choice. But just feeling what it's like just to move that foot, rolling from the foot, and then your ankle, and then thinking of the knee. And then you can think about just moving your bottom across, keeping it in a straight line. And then your hands on your ribs, just thinking of moving your ribs across. And then you can think of just moving your shoulders across. What's it like when you move the shoulders? And then you can just move your head and see what happens then with your weight. Repeat this several times, just beginning to start to get an idea, because taking weight on one leg is usually the first thing that you do before you take a step. And sometimes it's good to watch other people walking. And you might find that if you're at a social, if you're walking around during the day, if you're sitting in a coffee shop, you can just idly watch people walking on by. And you'll see quite a large number of those people rock from side to side as they walk. And obviously when we're walking, we're trying to go forwards. But they may be rocking side to side, they may be taking their weight, and then have a look down at their limbs and see whether when they're walking, their knees are a little bit knock-kneed, if their ankle is a little rolled in. And these kinds of patterns appear very young. So quite often, by the time children are 8, 9, 10, they're already beginning to start to develop movement patterns. So if you happen to be somewhere and you're watching, maybe waiting for school children to come out, if you're picking them up from school, you can watch children walking. And you can just start to notice how many different kinds of things people do that they call walking. It can be a lot easier to see what other people do rather than thinking of yourself. And you might be thinking, well, what's the point? Well, the point is that when you have problems with joints, you often get problems with pain and discomfort. And if you always do the same things, if you always move the same way, then the chances are that that problem is not going to resolve. It's going to stay the same. And if you do have wear and tear problems in joints, or you have had broken bones, fractures, etc., which is something I deal a lot with, highly complex injuries. And getting back into the comfort of using a limb after you've had a complex accident, injury, surgery, etc., it needs an enormous amount of rehabilitation, and often without realising it, people are not really using that limb in the same way that they were before. It might be there is some constraints, but often there can be a big pattern of lack of skill, lack of strength, lack of coordination, lack of stamina for distance walking. So there can be many reasons why a walking pattern hasn't got back to the way it was years ago after a hip replacement, a knee replacement, or having had a fracture. And sometimes there is potential to make shifts and changes, but unfortunately it may be that with the 3 or 4 or 6 or 8 sessions of NHS or similar or even private physiotherapy treatment, that those problems are not addressed. And I often see people who've had full courses of treatment through a provider, months of treatment, and yet they're still not standing on a leg that's mended. So I hope this is helpful. And the reason that this is a useful thing for you to practice is because when you start to explore, you also start to find some reasons that you might be having difficulties. And then if you find reasons, you can always leave me a message, send me a message, and we can have a little conversation about that. But equally, if you find there is a pattern and it's something that you notice in yourself, you can discuss it with your healthcare professional. They may not understand how to work with you because this kind of work is quite deep and complicated, and there aren't many people in the UK who are using work like this. I'm quite a specialist in this area, and I do tend to train other practitioners, but that number is growing very, very slowly. So this is the end of the second small introduction, and we'll move on to the third one. So this little lesson is called Rediscovering Rotation, and this is an adaptation of a much longer lesson that is a lesson I very, very frequently train. It's a lesson that I train if I'm giving a talk at a workshop to help people understand how quickly they can actually relearn movement patterns. So in this lesson, again, if you can't sit on the edge of the chair, then do it in your imagination. But if you can, come to sit at the front of the chair so you're not resting against the back. And sit with your feet flat on the floor. And what I want you to do is just, in sitting, don't have your arms on the chair, just leave them on your lap. But in sitting, I just want you to turn towards your right. Don't push things, but just turn towards your right. And as you turn, get to the sort of the end of that comfortable feeling. And just sort of look at the landmark that you can see. It might be the edge of a door frame. You might have a window next to you. You might be able to see a tree out of the window. And just sort of make a mental record of how far you could turn without pushing, without holding your breath, etc. And then come back to the middle. And then maybe do the same thing to the other side. And do the same thing, turning to the other side, just seeing how far you can turn. And coming back to the centre. So do that once or twice, just notice what it's like. And what I'd like you to do now is just to raise we'll start with the right arm. We're going to work with the right arm, and then you can repeat this activity with the left arm at a later point. So lift your right arm up so that your elbow is level with the shoulder and your forearm is straight out in front of the elbow with your hand dropping down. So your arm is up in front of you. And I want you to watch your hand. So I want you to look at your hand and now repeat that turning to the right. But this time you're watching your hand. So very slowly and gently, just turning to the right and feeling where it's comfortable to go. And then coming back to the center. So your eyes are moving, your head is moving, your arm is moving, and you're turning to the right. And come back and do that very slowly. And do it 2 or 3 times, and then you can, if you want to, you can just bring your hand down, rest it. At any point during the lesson, you can stop the lesson and you can have a rest. You can turn it back on and carry on. So 3 or 4 repetitions of doing this. And then come back. Have rest. Rests are important because they allow your system to work out what's going on. And now this time, I want you to have the arm in the same configuration. But this time, you're going to see if you can keep your head and your nose, all of it, pointing forwards, but your arm is still going to turn to the right, and this time you're just going to watch the movement with your eyes. So as you move that arm, you're just allowing your eyes to move, not your head. Your nose is stuck forwards as if somebody has put a piece of rod between the nose and straight out in front of you. So just notice what it's like to take that arm around to the side and just watch it with your eyes. See what it's like to let your eyes go over to the side and then come back in with the movement of that hand. And again, repeat that 2 or 3 times. We're just going to do this with this right arm. Now, obviously, if you've got a constraint, you can do it with your left arm. If you had a stroke or you've got weakness or you've got a painful shoulder, do it on the other arm. It's easy as that. Go back and start again and do it on the other arm. Have a rest, and if you want to, you can turn the recording off. And then bring yourself back up into that same configuration with the arm in front of you and the hand dropping down. Now this time, you're going to see if you can keep your eyes looking forward, but this time your head is going to move with your arm, but your eyes are going to stay looking to the front. So you're going to look to the front, your head's turning as your arm is turning, but your eyes are staying looking to the front. Now, you might find that you need to sort of concentrate and practice a little bit, keeping those eyes looking on a point, say, in front of you. You might find it's good to fix on something. Your head's going to the right. If it's the left arm, but you know what I mean. And your arm is going to the right. And so you're turning the elbow, your body, your head, but your eyes are staying looking at the front. About 3 times. Have a rest and stop. Well, you can rest as much as you like because you can turn this off, but I'm carrying on. All right, one last time. Arm up again. Elbow bent at 90 degrees, hanging in front of you. Now this time, what you're going to do is as you take your arm to the right and your body to the right, you're going to actually turn your head to the left. So literally you're going to turn your head and look to the left as your arm goes to the right. And then you're going to come back and you're going to turn your head and your eyes to your left as your arm goes to the right. And you'll feel yourself turning through your body. So your head is turning in one direction with your eyes, and your body and arm is turning in the opposite. And again, practice this 2 or 3 times. And then bring the arm down and have a nice little rest. Have a wriggle of those shoulder blades. Just let them relax. And then what I want you to do is to bring the arm, or leave the arm in that configuration, and just turn to your right. Do you remember when you had a look to the right? Just turn to your right and see how far you can see now. How easy is it to look at the point that you looked at the start? Remember when you turned to the right originally? I asked you to look at a landmark to see how far you could turn. And now have a look and see how far you can turn this time. And pretty much for everyone, this will have improved. It will have shifted. It will have changed. And the reason that this has changed is because you're now moving different parts of yourself in different ways. And you've learned how to do that without having put any strain or stress or effort into the work. And even if it's only a very small change, that change has been achieved without stretching, without straining, without, pulling and pushing, etc. And also notice how that side of yourself feels. And there might be a different feeling. That side might feel softer. I don't know. But leave this alone for a little bit and then come back and repeat these movements on the other side. And again, I'd love to get some feedback. Send me a message. Let me know how you get on with it. But this is Jill, Wigmore-Welsh here from Reading in Berkshire. I'm doing my next talk in 2 weeks on Rest Less in the UK. Rest Less is 2 words, Rest Less platform. And I look forward to seeing you there. It's about the brain body. It's called the Bone-Brain Hormone Network. And we're going to discover how the brain and bones all are communicating together through these hormones, which I think it's going to be an interesting one because hormones are so important for every function in our life. Probably not so much in depth, this one. Easier takeaways. But as I say, glad to bring you this recording. Love to talk, love to tell you all about your system and to help you to lead a long, healthy lifespan. Love you all. Take care. Bye.